I'm Lisa McCree. Welcome to the News Magazine with a Difference. The legacy of DES, hailed at the start of the baby boom generation as heaven sent, the miracle drug that claimed it could help women have babies.
I can remember him saying to me, "Oh, you're very fortunate because we have a new drug that prevents miscarriage."
But DES brought its daughters a legacy of pain. And what about the other victims of DES?
I read about testicular cancer. I looked for any information I could find. There's not a whole lot available.
Tonight, the almost untold story of DES sons. And from Amelia Earhart to Evel Knievel, people who take risks. What makes them different?
I call those the type T personalities. T for thrill-seeking and risk-taking.
Some challenge society, others challenge themselves, sometimes to the very edge.
If anything went wrong, you're falling out of the sky and you probably wouldn't survive.
From the heights of the Himalayas to the down and dirty world of business, women as thrill seekers.
Good to see you again, Counselor.
And Hollywood faces AIDS. With the hit movie Philadelphia expected to win Oscar nominations, Natasha Richardson looks back at the life of her father, Tony Richardson. He was the director of films such as Tom Jones and Hotel New Hampshire, and fought a stoic battle against AIDS.
My father's way of fighting it was, one, denying it, and just dealing with the specific illnesses one at a time, rather than the whole thing.
A moving conversation with the daughter of Tony Richardson and Vanessa Redgrave. And finally, the marriage of technology and sex, from X-rated discs to computer bulletin boards, where you may meet a mate, or not.
It could be a 60-year-old man who dials in as Susie Jones, 21-year-old college student.
And who's in the forefront of creating and promoting it?
Women have to be at the forefront of it, otherwise we're going to be left with the same old sexist garbage.
Is this the same old pornography wrapped up in a new medium? A look at the world of cybersex. All that and more tonight on Lifetime Magazine.
The critics agree about the season's funniest and smartest new comedy. Newsweek, I'll Do Anything is wickedly funny and surprisingly touching.
Is there a name for what we just had?
Time Magazine, these are characters we never want to let go.
Why are you breathing so heavy?
Nervous.
Siskel and Ebert, 2 thumbs up.
It's not your fault.
It's not?
No. It's just that he's too good for you.
I'll Do Anything, rated PG-13, at theaters now.
This is Celestial Seasoning's absolutely delicious Iced Delight iced tea. It's knock your socks off easy. Just plunk the bags into cold water and it brews in your fridge in an hour or so. Iced Delight is so easy to make. Sometimes it gets up and makes itself. So don't boil water to brew iced tea, you might hurt yourself. Celestial Seasoning's Iced Delight has no caffeine and it brews in your fridge. And it's hard to hurt yourself on a fridge. Brew some up and have a celestial day.
The Rape of Richard Beck, tomorrow night at 9. It's all part of the Men of Lifetime.
We begin with a look at the law of unintended consequences. When new drugs are tested in this country, the clinical trials may go on for years before the product is declared safe and effective enough to go on the market. But in some cases, negative effects may not show up for years. It was an era of medical miracles. New antibiotics cured illnesses that once killed. A vaccine was bringing an end to the polio epidemic. So when a doctor told Mary Kenny that a new drug could prevent miscarriage, she didn't ask many questions.
I started to spot. I was starting to miscarry the baby. And I can remember him saying to me, "Oh, you're very fortunate because we have a new drug that prevents miscarriage." And of course I was thrilled.
Mary Kenny took the drug in 1950 because she would have done whatever was necessary to have a healthy child. The miracle drug was diethylstilbestrol, DES, a synthetic estrogen manufactured by at least 200 companies under more than 60 names. Home Movies chronicled her growing family. Mary took the drug while pregnant with 3 of her next 4 children. She never knew that according to a 1953 study, the drug was not effective in preventing miscarriage and that animal studies had found it carcinogenic. By 1971, as many as 2 million mothers had taken the drug. There are no exact numbers with so many manufacturers and so much time passed. There are only estimates. 2 million mothers, 2 million daughters, 2 million sons. Cynthia Laitman, who wrote a book about DES in 1981, was prescribed the drug during her pregnancy in 1969.
I estimated that in my own pregnancy, by the time I was told I could stop taking DES, I was taking the equivalent in estrogenic content of 9 months' worth of birth control pills every single day.
2 years later, in 1971, DES was found to cause a rare form of vaginal cancer in a small percentage of the daughters. The FDA ordered an end to prescription of DES during pregnancy. But by then, the miracle drug had left a legacy of pain for many of the DES daughters. Up to 50% are like Kathleen Kenny Sanderson, free of cancer, but not free of problems.
I don't think I'll ever have a child naturally. I have to have tests quite often to make sure that precancerous testing to make sure that cancer isn't an issue. So those are all things I'm still discovering as the years go on.
DES faded into the background for Kathleen as she went on with her life, busy with her 2 adopted sons. But then her younger brother Bill called to say he found a lump in his testicle.
My first reaction is always, oh, you're going to be fine, don't worry. That's the way I was brought up. Don't worry, no, we don't have that in our family. And I was doing all the same things that everyone had done to me. We don't have that in our family, nothing like, don't worry, it's just something minor, it's maybe an infection, sometimes you get these things. And then I started to all of a sudden think about it. I said, well, Billy, did you ever think about DES?
And she said, go to the doctor immediately. And I said, why? And she told me that the support group she had gone to, the DES support group, all the guys in it had had testicular cancer. And I had never heard of testicular cancer. So I called the next morning and made an appointment and went in that day. And the following day I was in surgery. I had been diagnosed and had to have my testicle removed.
What did your doctor say when you told him you'd been DES exposed?
When I mentioned that to my doctor, he said, I don't care how you got this. All I care about is getting rid of it. And at the time, that seemed pretty reasonable to me.
According to urological oncologist Edward Messing, that reaction is not unusual.
I'd be pretty safe in saying that virtually no urologists really bring this up to patients, so I don't think it's a question that's asked. I think it should be for 2 reasons. One, for interest's sake, that is, at some stage in the future, we may be able to get a handle on this issue just by asking enough questions. And I think more importantly, if DES or any antenatal exposure was really important in this disease, it probably would lead to the development of tumors on each side, and I think that requires a much different kind of follow-up and evaluations.
I just found out when I got cancer the first time when I was 30 years old. I'm 34.
Then Bill Kenny had a second occurrence of testicular cancer. It was a different, more aggressive cancer than the first. This time, surgery included removal of his lymph nodes, and he underwent chemotherapy. He looked for answers to the question, why me?
I called up the Cancer Society. I got in touch with DES Action. I read about DES and I read about testicular cancer. I looked for any information I could find. There's not a whole lot available. There's a lot of research done on the daughters, but hardly any on the sons.
The effects of DES exposure on sons like Bill have not been fully researched, and unanswered questions remain for the entire DES-exposed population. Are DES mothers at increased risk for breast cancer? Will DES daughters face new problems as they approach menopause? Might there be a new cluster of vaginal cancer as these women age? Are there autoimmune problems in DES-exposed people? And what about transgenerational effects? So much research has not been done.
The original amount of time passed, no more funds for research on DES were forthcoming. And the population was going to go by unexamined, and whatever risks existed were going to go by unnoticed, and people were not going to be warned of their health risks.
The sons won't get conclusive answers to the questions about DES and cancer, infertility, or urogenital tract abnormalities from the studies that have been done.
In the studies that were done at the University of Chicago, it was clear that the people seemed to have abnormal sperm counts and seemed to have reduced fertility, although those studies were done, they were not completed. The last publications were 10 years ago, and that was really on studies done perhaps 15 years ago, and so many of those men were not really yet entering the time that they were interested in being fertile.
And as these men age, there are concerns about the possibility of an increased risk of prostate cancer. But beyond physical health, exposed sons face a psychological burden. Personal and societal images of masculinity are tied up with fertility and male genitals. Where did you turn for support?
I called the DES Action. My sister gave me their number, and they put me in touch with Mike Freelick, who lives in Pennsylvania, and he had testicular cancer. And so I called him, and he was the first person that I spoke to who had been through what I was going through. And I think he was like 6 or 7 years beyond it. So that was helpful right there, just to know that there was life after cancer.
I remember going out to meet him not too long ago before his second surgery, and it was just great meeting him and seeing his face. Most of the people I talk to I never really see. I correspond over the phone or through the mail. I think in my mind, if I can help just one person such as him, it's worthwhile doing what I'm doing.
What Mike Freilich is doing is being open about subjects many men won't discuss: genital problems and fertility. He went through surgery and chemotherapy 10 years ago. He then overcame his natural shyness to reach out to other DES sons.
The general public of men in that age group, again, born between the years 1941 to 1971, that were having these problems, such as testicular cancer, not only testicular cancer, but infertility problems, structural problems in the genital area, such as small testicles or small penises or something like that, cysts on the testicles. And it just seemed to me that it was more than coincidence that the men were having these problems. I mean, they all have one thing in common: they're DES sons.
And the sons have something else in common. Their mothers, like Grace Freilich, must come to grips with the irony that the very drug they took to save their babies may have caused their sons pain.
It was devastating when you have taken the drug and your child becomes very ill and you feel that that illness might be the result of your having taken that drug, that you would become feeling very guilty about it. And after I got over the guilt, then I got very angry. That why was I given this drug? Why wasn't this drug tested? And it was really a very bad situation at that time.
Mike married Carol about 2 years ago. Now together they face another problem. Mike's surgery and chemotherapy left him unable to father children.
I think there's still a lot of anger involved. You know, why should I have had to go through the cancer, and now why should I have to be infertile? I see other people having kids. You know, we see it all the time. We just went to my wife's reunion, high school reunion, and there were a lot of her friends there, and they had children, and it is hard to deal with.
I think I was probably more angry that he, as a person, had to go through everything he's had to go through in his life. I think he would make a wonderful father. I see how he is with his nephew, and it's sad that he will never be able to have children of his own.
And according to Dr. John McLaughlin, chief scientist at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, human studies to date can't tell Mike why he had cancer.
In male mice, we've seen an increased incidence in cancers of the testes. There have been a few case reports of testicular cancer in men who were exposed prenatal to DS, but I think these are still in the realm of case reports and anecdotal information. There hasn't been any thorough study that I'm aware of to investigate these kinds of findings. So at the present time, I think we'd have to say it's either unknown or there doesn't seem to be a relationship that's been described between prenatal DES in humans and testicular cancer.
A new round of research is starting, funded by $6.5 million in congressional appropriations. A smaller amount will pay for a communication campaign. The grant was prompted largely by outspoken activism by DES-exposed women. Only about a quarter of that money will go toward research on sons.
Is any of this money going to the DES Cancer Network?
Men like Bill Kenny and Mike Freilich are unusual in their presence in DES action meetings and in their openness. They want to demystify their illness for others and provide an information and support system that wasn't there for them.
I guess one of the messages that I would want to get across to guys is that testicular cancer does not mean necessarily that you can't have kids or that you can't enjoy a normal, healthy sex life. That everything else can't go just as planned. Because I think that that fear is a reason a lot of people don't do anything until it's too late.
We need more data. We need more men to come out and say, hey, I'm a DES son, I've had testicular cancer, I have a fertility problem.
The DES-exposed population will remain limited, but DES research may yield clues to the behavior of other estrogenic compounds.
DES, if we take the time to understand it, I think will have very important implications for understanding human health in general.
But in the near term, Bill Kenny holds on to the hope that going public with something so private will prompt research that will end his uncertainty.
We're like these little experiments, these little time bombs. Nobody really knows what's going to happen next in the DES-exposed population. But by banding together and learning from one another, we can prepare ourselves.
We approached several makers of DES, and they declined to comment on any of the problems DES sons say they've experienced. Coming up later, as Hollywood begins to come to grips with AIDS, actress Natasha Richardson reflects on her film director father's death from the disease. But next, women who push themselves to the limits, flying balloons, climbing mountains, what drives them to put life and limb at risk?
Oh.